Behind closed doors, a handful of men have redrawn the borders of nations, shifted the balance of global power, and decided the fate of millions with a single signature. These weren't battles fought on fields or revolutions in the streets. They were secret deals, hidden from the public eye, that changed the course of history forever. What if I told you that some of the most powerful agreements ever made were never meant for you to see? Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, world leaders have gathered in private to negotiate treaties, trade deals, and pacts that would reshape entire continents. From the end of World War I to the digital age, these secret negotiations have determined who holds power, who controls resources, and who pays the price. Some of these deals brought peace, while others planted seeds of conflict that we're still living with today. The story matters now because the consequences of these hidden agreements continue to affect global politics, economics, and the lives of ordinary people across every continent. Understanding how these deals were made and what was traded away in the process reveals how the modern world was truly built. Our story begins in 1919, in the aftermath of the First World War. Allied powers gathered at the Palace of Versailles in France to negotiate the treaty that would officially end the conflict. While much of the Treaty of Versailles was public, secret protocols and side agreements carved up the territories of defeated empires behind closed doors. National Archives, Treaty of Versailles records. France and Britain reportedly made private arrangements about Middle Eastern oil fields and colonial territories without consulting the populations who lived there. Fast forward to February 1945. The war in Europe was ending, but another conflict was beginning. At Yalta, a resort town on the Black Sea, Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin met to decide the shape of post-war Europe. Yalta Conference official transcripts, U.S. State Department. According to declassified documents, the leaders made secret deals about which nations would fall under Soviet influence and which would remain in the Western sphere. Poland's fate was sealed in conversations the Polish government never attended. Just months later, in August 1945, the Potsdam Conference continued these secret arrangements. Germany would be divided. Korea would be split at the 38th parallel. The decisions made in private meetings at Potsdam would lead directly to the Cold War, the Berlin Wall, and the Korean War. Historical records, Potsdam Conference, National Archives. The pattern continued through the Cold War era. In 1956, Britain, France, and Israel allegedly coordinated a secret plan to invade Egypt and reclaim the Suez Canal. According to declassified British government documents, the Suez Crisis Files, UK National Archives. The plan failed, but it revealed how major democracies could conspire in secret to reshape the Middle East. The consequences of that intervention are still felt in the region today. Then came one of history's most consequential secret deals. In 1972, President Richard Nixon's security advisor Henry Kissinger made clandestine trips to China, hidden even from the U.S. State Department. Kissinger Memoirs, Nixon Presidential Library Records. These secret negotiations opened relations between America and Communist China, fundamentally altering the global balance of power. The deal was struck before the American public, or most of the government, even knew talks were happening. The 1970s brought another hidden agreement that would reshape the world economy. After the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, the United States reportedly negotiated a secret understanding with Saudi Arabia. According to economic historians and declassified Treasury documents, U.S. Treasury historical records, multiple economic analyses, America would provide military protection to the Saudi kingdom. In return, Saudi Arabia would price oil in U.S. dollars and invest its oil profits in American debt. This Petrodollar system gave the United States massive economic leverage that continues today. Jump to 1986. In Reykjavik, Iceland, Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev came close to agreeing to eliminate all nuclear weapons. According to participants in the talks, Reagan library records, Gorbachev Foundation documents. The secret negotiations broke down over disagreements about missile defense, but they set the stage for later arms reduction treaties. The public learned about these dramatic proposals only after the summit ended. The digital age brought new kinds of secret deals. In 2013, whistleblower Edward Snowden revealed that the United States had allegedly made classified agreements with tech companies and foreign governments for mass surveillance programs. Snowden documents, reported by The Guardian and The Washington Post. These secret arrangements gave intelligence agencies access to private communications of millions of people worldwide. The deals were made without public debate or democratic oversight. More recently, trade agreements have been negotiated in secret before being presented to legislatures and the public. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, negotiated between 2010 and 2015, was drafted behind closed doors with limited public access to the text, leaked TPP drafts, WikiLeaks, official USTR statements. Corporate representatives reportedly had more input than elected officials in some participating countries. While the deal was eventually made public and never fully ratified, it showed how modern economic agreements that affect millions can be shaped in secret. The historical record for these secret deals comes from multiple sources with varying levels of confirmation. The Yalta and Potsdam agreements are confirmed through official government archives that have been declassified over decades. U.S. National Archives, UK National Archives, Russian State Archive. Primary documents, including meeting minutes and correspondence, provide direct evidence of what was discussed and agreed upon. The Suez Crisis conspiracy is supported by declassified British government files released under the 30-year rule. Though some details remain disputed by historians, UK government declassified documents, 1980s releases. The Kissinger China visits are confirmed by Kissinger's own memoirs, Chinese official histories, and U.S. government records, Nixon Presidential Library. The Petrodollar arrangement is more complex to verify. No single treaty document exists, but the relationship is confirmed through multiple U.S. Treasury records, Federal Reserve documents, and economic data showing consistent patterns from the 1970s onward. U.S. Treasury Department historical records, Federal Reserve archives. Economists describe it as an informal understanding rather than a formal written treaty. The NSA surveillance agreements revealed by Snowden are alleged based on classified documents whose authenticity has been confirmed by multiple news organizations and not disputed by the U.S. government. Reporting by The Guardian, The Washington Post, verified by intelligence officials. However, the full scope and exact terms of alleged deals with tech companies remain partially unclear due to ongoing classification. For the TPP and similar modern trade deals, leaked draft texts and official statements provide evidence of the secretive negotiation process. WikiLeaks releases, official USTR communications. The final text was eventually released publicly, but the negotiation process itself was conducted with limited transparency. Conflicting views and gaps. Not everyone agrees that secrecy in these negotiations was unjustified or harmful. Defenders of secret diplomacy argue that complex international negotiations require confidentiality to succeed. Diplomats and negotiators claim that public posturing and political pressure can make compromise impossible. Statements from former diplomats, academic studies on negotiation. According to this view, some level of private discussion is necessary for leaders to explore options and make difficult trade-offs. Historical supporters of the Yalta agreements, for instance, argue that Roosevelt and Churchill had limited leverage against Stalin and made the best deals possible given Soviet military control of Eastern Europe. Historical analyses, Cold War scholarship. Critics counter that secret arrangements betrayed the principles of self-determination the Allies claimed to fight for. Regarding the petrodollar system, some economists argue it created stability in global oil markets and helped finance American prosperity. Economic analyses from multiple universities. Others contend it gave the U.S. unfair advantages and contributed to Middle Eastern conflicts. Alternative economic perspectives. International relations scholars. On modern surveillance agreements, intelligence officials maintain that secret cooperation between agencies and companies is essential for national security. Official government statements. Privacy advocates argue that secret deals bypass democratic accountability and violate civil liberties. ACLU, Electronic Frontier Foundation statements. For trade agreements like the TPP, negotiators argue that confidentiality prevents interest groups from derailing talks before compromise is reached. USTR official explanations. Critics maintain that corporate interests gain disproportionate influence when negotiations happen behind closed doors. Labor unions, public interest groups. Significant gaps remain in the historical record. Many documents are still classified, particularly regarding intelligence sharing and surveillance agreements. The full details of economic arrangements between nations are often kept confidential for decades. We may not know the complete truth about many secret deals until archives are opened years or decades from now.
The secret agreements made at Yalta and Potsdam determined the fate of hundreds of millions of people across Eastern Europe and Asia. Families were separated by borders they had no say in creating. Entire nations found themselves under Soviet control without their consent. The division of Korea at the 38th parallel, decided by American and Soviet officials looking at a map, led to a war that killed millions and created a split that persists 70 years later. The petrodollar system contributed to wealth concentration in certain regions, while other areas struggled with debt and economic dependency. Countries that couldn't access dollar-denominated financing faced disadvantages in global trade. The system reportedly gave the U.S. power to impose economic sanctions that have affected the lives of ordinary people in targeted nations. From Iraq to Iran to Venezuela, economic impact studies. UN reports on sanctions. The surveillance agreements revealed by Snowden affected the privacy of billions of people worldwide. Activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens found that their private communications had been swept up in secret data collection programs they never consented to. Some individuals faced risks to their safety when their communications were exposed. Documented cases reported by civil liberties organizations. Think of international relations like a poker game where some players can see everyone else's cards. Secret deals give certain nations and leaders an advantage that others don't have. When agreements are made in private, the public can't weigh in on decisions that will affect their lives, their economies, and sometimes their safety. Historians point out that secret diplomacy has always existed, but democratic societies are supposed to operate on principles of transparency and accountability, academic perspectives on diplomacy and democracy. When leaders make binding agreements in secret, they bypass the normal checks and balances that prevent abuse of power. This creates a tension between the practical needs of negotiation and the democratic ideal of informed consent. The pattern reveals something important about how power really works in the modern world. Official channels and public announcements are often just the surface layer. Beneath them, a hidden architecture of deals, understandings, and arrangements shapes what's actually possible. Understanding this hidden layer helps explain why certain patterns persist in global politics despite public opposition, and why some problems seem impossible to solve through normal democratic processes. We know that throughout modern history, leaders have made agreements in secret that reshaped nations, economies, and the balance of global power. We have solid evidence for some deals, partial documentation for others, and likely remain unaware of many arrangements that are still classified. What we don't know is the full extent of how these secret agreements continue to operate today, or what deals are being made right now behind closed doors. The question isn't whether secret diplomacy will continue, but whether democratic societies can find a balance between necessary confidentiality and public accountability. What's next? In the near term, more historical documents will likely be declassified, revealing additional details about Cold War-era secret agreements. Confidence high. Archives are regularly released on 30 to 50-year cycles, and we're approaching the declassification period for many 1980s and 1990s agreements. Modern trade and technology agreements will probably continue to be negotiated with limited transparency, followed by public debate only after terms are largely set. Confidence, medium-high. This pattern has been consistent across multiple recent agreements. Public pressure for transparency in international negotiations may increase, especially regarding digital privacy and surveillance agreements. Confidence, medium. Civil society organizations are increasingly focused on these issues, but powerful institutional interests favor confidentiality. New secret arrangements between major powers regarding technology, artificial intelligence, and cyber warfare are likely being made now, though we may not learn about them for years or decades. Confidence, medium. The strategic importance of these areas and the historical pattern suggest this is probable. The secret deals that change the world remind us that history is shaped not just by public events, but by private conversations we may never fully know about. The challenge for democratic societies is ensuring that necessary diplomatic confidentiality doesn't become a cover for decisions that should involve public input. If you want to understand how modern economic power was truly built, watch our next video, The Real Story Behind the US Dollar's Global Dominance. You'll see how the secret agreements we discussed today connect to the economic system we all live under now. Source notes and disclaimer. This documentary draws on declassified government archives, academic historical research, journalistic investigations by major news organizations, and official government statements. Some details remain disputed by historians or are based on partial documentation. This field is subject to ongoing research and revision as new documents are declassified. We've aimed to present information with appropriate qualifications and to distinguish between confirmed facts, alleged arrangements, and areas of genuine historical uncertainty. For specific source citations, see the video description.